Case study from a newly qualified occupational therapist perspective. Condition. I am profoundly deaf with a visual impairment, according to the Equality Act 2010. These are classified as sensory impairments. Which have affected me more in education and work? Both of them. I've been deaf all my life, and the visual impairment began during my late teens. How do they affect me? I lip read, have bilateral hearing aids, which I use with a radio aid system, which I've used throughout my education and career. However, I cannot hear everything individual people say or distinguish speech during loud background noise. This includes small and large group working scenarios during seminars and lecturers presenting, echo recordings, podcasts, radio clips, voiceovers on videos and YouTube. How are you supposed to lip read these? This is where my visual impairment becomes a hindrance. I'm an expert lip reader, but only if people are within 3 meters or so, as I can't see from the distances I used to. And if the lighting is turned off or down, how am I supposed to lip read then? Journey into higher education. As I was already working within the NHS throughout the UCAS application process, I did not inform my colleagues that I had applied for a place on the OT course. At the time, the biggest support came from my support worker at the time. Prior to my filling in the UCAS application, I consulted the Occupational Therapist Career Handbook, which was likened to a Bible at the time. It was inspiring and listed recommendations such as visiting occupational therapists prior to application, how to write my personal statement, and signposted me to information regarding Disabled Students Allowance, DSA, which I previously knew about due to being a recipient on another course. The UCAS process, from what I can remember, seemed fairly straightforward, and I ticked the box to indicate I had a disability. One university's disability services team sent an email very quickly, asking about the nature of my disability and support needs. This was excellent integration and sharing of information, as I had got a place there. I'm confident my support needs would have been in place on arrival. Admissions process. I found the process and the waiting quite stressful, as in order to gain information throughout the admissions process, my support worker called on my behalf, which was a great help, as often email, as useful as it is, can be brief and takes a while. On being invited to the selection day or interview, I was anxious about whether I would mishear or worse, still not be able to lip read or hear people during the group work activity because of their accents, quietness of their voice or loudness of background noise. As if these events did occur, would it reflect badly on me? Would it lead to me not be given a place? Therefore, in managing these anxieties, my support worker ran in advance to see how the selection day would happen. Knowing what I knew about the DDA of 1995, I was aware services such as universities are required to provide support to potential students, and the key worker for deaf students had arranged for a communication support worker to attend the day with me. Along with using my radio aid system, I explained to the lecturer and my small group what it was and how to use this in order to help me hear what was being said. I also introduced my CSW, who would support me by signing anything I missed, explanations from the lecturer and comments from the bigger group as a whole. During the activity itself, I realised I was the oldest member, and after reading the task out, I remember asking the group for their thoughts. This was to encourage discussion, as there was not much conversation happening spontaneously, probably due to everyone's nervousness. This was a good strategy, which I used in order to feel more in control of the situation. This also showed that I am able to manage my disability and support needs, because after all, how would I as an OT be able to empower and advocate for other people with various disabilities, impairments and support needs if I couldn't do this for myself? Following the selection day, which included a written test, I felt confident that I'd done my best. I met the Occupational Therapy Course Year 1 lead prior to starting the course, along with representatives from the Disability Unit, to discuss my specific learning support needs in view of my disability. Therefore, I'm glad I told the university about my disability, and in sharing this information with the Disability Services Unit, decide to ensure my support needs were met. General experience teaching and learning. I naturally had anxieties regarding whether I would hear and keep up with the teaching programme as I entered my first few lectures and seminars. However, I soon got over these anxieties as I settled into my first year seminar group, as I could see a few students with disabilities. I wasn't the only student with a disability, as I had always been throughout my education. I remember thinking, I don't want to have to explain my disability because I didn't want to force it on people. Therefore, I'd only talk about it if it came up during conversation or people asked me about it directly. The biggest help was the fact that I could essentially employ a freelance communication support worker, or CSW, with funding from the Disabled Students Allowance, DSA. I had an assessment prior to the course and allocated a package of resources to help with the learning experience at university. The CSW took notes in lectures, seminars and group working, as well as signed everything I did not hear. They would also write notes from online lectures or podcasts. Other students would have access to these at home, whereas I did not have this flexibility, and I'd have to have these written in between lectures at university to make the most of the time the CSW had been allocated for. Having the same CSW for certain modules was very helpful for continuity and CSW understanding of terminology in both signing and written notes. Online access to Moodle was useful in other ways. By reading lecturers' PowerPoint slides, important PDFs, other notes and forums. However, this facility is only helpful when lecturers would post the PowerPoints and information in advance, which did not always happen. Having the use of a radio aid system was invaluable with students and staff during all teaching methods, as I could control the volume of people's voices. During the course of each lecture and seminar, I would hand over my microphone to the lecturers and students. Pretty much most would forget to hand it over to another speaker, and I would always have to remind them. The face-to-face teaching I felt was very good, but there seemed to be a lot of emphasis placed on alternative online teaching methods such as online lectures, Skype, video and audio use, which to a deaf student isn't user-friendly. For the CSW to transcribe every single one of these would be too expensive. However, I did request for some materials to be transcribed and was told it wasn't possible. Therefore, as a student, I had to make a choice of which was the most important to the CSW to transcribe, bearing in mind I had been allocated a limited DSA fund. For this reason, it did feel as though I had to work a lot harder than non-disabled students by reading a lot more to prove I could do it, and it taught me problem solving and prioritisation skills and working around these issues. Placements. I received comprehensive support from the university placement team prior to and during all 3 placements, and fantastic support from each placement practice educator, or PPE. Despite having a previous working history within the NHS, it was not as an OT. Therefore, I did have concerns which were discussed with the placement team and individual PPEs. A pre-placement visit was completed with the potential PPE, a member of the placement team, and myself, before each placement to discuss my situation and any reasonable adjustments. This planning was excellent, and I felt I was being listened to and my concerns taken seriously. The placement team suggested I step out of my comfort zone in order to encourage different experiences within a safe environment, which was a good learning opportunity. All PPEs seemed open-minded, flexible and adaptable to my support needs. Discussions regarding reasonable adjustments included: I do not use the telephone as I cannot hear people well enough to distinguish clearly what is being said. Therefore, no PPE would ask me to make calls. However, if I needed calls making, it was agreed I could ask the receptionist, OT assistants or OTs, ensuring confidentiality. On a mental health placement, strategies were discussed regarding my not hearing patients come up behind me. As a result, I would ensure I had placed myself in a position where no one could, for example, back close to the wall, or be in a position to observe what was happening safely. On a neurological placement, I was not able to hear some patients who had a communication deficit affecting their speech, for instance, stroke. Therefore, during initial assessments, it was agreed I would ask the questions and observe reactions whilst the PPE write their responses. I would always inform patients I was deaf, and would it be okay for them to wear a microphone to help me hear, except on the mental health placement where patients did not have the capacity due to their dementia. I do not recall having a negative response, as most people wanted to be of assistance. In my experience, being deaf can be very useful, particularly with those who have hearing aids or know others who are deaf. It was therefore very useful for building therapeutic relationships with patients. On reflection, all 3 placements were incredibly tiring. Because as a deaf student, it is draining when observing activities and trying to listen to everything people were saying. Therefore, my advice to other prospective health and social care students who are disabled on how to get the most out of placements are as follows. Always be helpful and friendly to others. Muck in, be part of the team to help out others who are supporting you. Be open and honest about your disability and how it may affect you and aspects of the placement, and suggest ways of working around it or what you can do instead. Use your initiative and ask all staff members how you can help them. Do not stand or sit around doing nothing. Overall, my 3 placements were positive experiences. I felt I not only learnt a lot, but that I could also educate others on the placement in terms of teaching aspects of deaf awareness and lip reading exercises to show how intense it can be for deaf or hard of hearing patients. Thoughts on qualifying and/or employment. I have a BSc Honours Occupational Therapy degree, in which I gained a first classification. All my hard work paid off, and I proved to myself and others that I could do it. The fact that I also achieved first-class grades on all 3 placements highlights the fact I can put into practice all the skills I have learned. In doing this, I had to balance demands placed on family time and moving areas for good placement opportunities. I am very proud of what I achieved and am now looking forward to the next challenge, finding an occupational therapist role. Employment. Finding your first occupational therapist role is a challenge, and even with first-class grades, having had a few interviews, it was surprising how little awareness occupational therapists have of the Access to Work (ATW) funding grant, considering some work with clients who have disabilities or impairments. This is in short similar to DSA, but provides practical support for qualified disabled health and social care professionals to gain or stay in employment or start a business. What would I say to other students considering a health and social care career? First and foremost, be honest with yourself and be your own expert about your disability or disabilities. Some people do not like to share their disability with UCAS, the university or others. This is your choice, but if you do, the university has a duty to support your needs and develop a plan to facilitate this. But they can only do this if you inform them. It will also lessen the stress prior to and during the first few weeks on the course. Ensure you have a DSA assessment well in advance of the course commencing so your support needs can be in place from the start. Talk to the disability unit of your chosen university. Find out if they have key workers for dyslexia, deafness and visual impairments, mental health, learning difficulties and other physical and sensory difficulties, as it may be that they have other information or strategies which could be of use. On a more general note, do not rush into doing a health or social care course. Do work as a healthcare assistant, OT or physiotherapy assistant, social care support worker, or do some voluntary work in a particular sector which interests you, such as older people, learning disabilities, or neuro-rehabilitation, as this experience will be valuable in getting onto your chosen course and possibly give you an advantage regarding future employment. Health and social care courses are not like doing more general degrees. You're expected to be a professional from day one, as there is an expectation you will be registered by your professional body on qualifying. This makes the courses intense and pressurised, so be hard-working, determined, and it will pay off. Hopefully your colleagues and patients will see you as a role model, even if you may not consider it yourself to be one.